Jake, I'm going to swing it over to you. I know you're very confident in your Rams, as you always are, but you didn't particularly love one move that your Rams made today. So talk to me about that move, and also talk to me about the 53-man in general. Any surprises, what you did like? Break it down for us. What do we need to know about the Rams 53-man roster?
Yeah, this is probably the toughest Rams roster I've seen my whole life to make. I've never seen a cut day get this tough to the point where a team had to cut a player that they were openly praising in the pressers. And I'm talking about Chris Paul Jr., the 5th round pick. I still think he was I thought he was a huge steal. I had a 29th overall grade on him. I just see a guy that can kind of do it all. And I do think an injury early on in camp that kind of held him out a little bit, put him behind the 8 ball. But I just think it's a mistake to cut a player like this when you have Troy Reeder, because it's like, I don't hate Troy Reeder like a lot of the Rams fans do. I understand what Troy Reeder's role is. He's a guy that knows the defense. He's one of those guys, and I say there's at least one guy on every single team that only that team would keep. And if he was cut, no other team would care. And Troy Reeder's that guy on the Rams. Like, he's been in this defense for a long time. He was on the Super Bowl team. I believe he even started in that game. He played meaningful snaps at very least. But this is a player that you could have cut and placed on your practice squad. And I just feel like you got to get creative when you have a roster like this. You can't just waive a guy like Chris Paul Jr. and expect him to come back. I feel like there was a better way to navigate this. And I would just look at the example of last year. They signed Ahkello Witherspoon week 2 as a veteran to their practice squad. They activated him 3 times and they added him to the roster. I would have rather done that than run the risk of losing a player, as talented as a Chris Paul Jr. So aside from that, the roster I think is really well constructed. I was surprised in a few spots. I mean, keeping Stetson Bennett, people are going to, kind of scoff at to keep 3 quarterbacks. I think it's the right decision. I like Bennett a lot. And I think, that you've already put 3 years in his development. 3 running backs. Some people are going to say, why didn't they keep Cody Schrader, who they claimed last year off of waivers? The 49ers were trying to slide him on the practice squad. He's a good player and he could play special teams. But again, this is the toughest roster in recent memory to make for the Rams. So I agreed with the 3 running backs, the 6 wide receivers. At one point I thought they were going to keep 5. Then Konate Mumfield, doesn't play in the final preseason game. And then Brendan Presley, who led all of preseason in receiving, he ends up sounding like he's going to get kept, and he doesn't. So I like the 6 wide receivers, 10 offensive linemen. Did not like the trade of KT Leveston over to the Browns. Call me cold-hearted. I don't care. I absolutely despise helping out other teams like that. The Browns are a terrible organization. I'm not trying to give them any help in their offensive line. KT Leveston, was one of the highest graded tackles in preseason. And I felt like, last year's 7th round pick didn't really get any opportunities last year at all, not even in preseason. This year he looked good in preseason, but I didn't feel like it was enough to potentially lose him. I would have run the risk of losing him for nothing in waivers than trading him for a 7th round pick in 2028. That's just me. But I like what the offensive line looks like. Alec Jackson's going to be good to go for week 1, so that's great. You look at the tight ends. I like the tight end room. Defensive lines, keeping 7 of them. Was a little surprised by that. That's a pretty big number, but it does, after further review, it does look like the Rams are playing Desjuan Johnson more on the outside at edge. So I think that was kind of the play there. They only kept 4 outside linebackers. They cut last year's 5th round pick, Brennan Jackson. Disagreed with that, but he could likely come back on the practice squad, assuming he gets through waivers, and I think he can. The 4 inside linebackers, again, I don't really understand the Reader point, but Sean Dolak made this team, and instead of complaining about Chris Paul Jr. the entire time, I want to give a lot of praise to Sean Dolak, who was failed by this whole draft system. I think they have absolutely failed small school players. After COVID, teams just only draft power 4 now, unless you really stand out. Sean Dolak wasn't invited to the combine. Okay. He didn't get that opportunity. And, I just think it's gotten to the point where you have these guys that are constantly making rosters, the 53-man roster, and it's not really a surprise. It just tells me that this process is heavily flawed and it used to be good, and now you're starting to see guys like this fall through the cracks. Well, luckily for the Rams, they were one of the teams that reaped the benefits there because Dolak can play in this league. Reminds me of Matt Milano. He's the one that I'm most excited about. They kept 4 corners. Did find out Akello and Emmanuel Forbes are going to start. They're going to rotate Kobe and Darius Williams, but that's a really good bunch of corners there. They kept 5 safeties, although you can call Josh Wallace, who they're very excited about, his versatility. He can be a safety. He can be a corner. He's going to be their star guy. They're going to have Quentin Lake in the star, and they're going to have Josh Wallace. So all in all, it's a great roster. It's a Super Bowl potential winning roster, in my opinion. I just didn't like the Chris Paul Jr. move, Brennan Jackson, and then trading Leveston. But Chris Paul Jr. to me is just more so value the talent. I just don't getting rid of him like that, no strings attached. So those are my thoughts. But no Rams fan should feel bad about this roster. It's really good.
Has Chris Paul done enough to justify probably a practice squad if he obviously clears waivers? Like, did he do enough in like preseason or training camp, or were you just really high on him coming into the draft? Like, what's the attachment?
Yeah, no, he did. Chris, and that was actually the thing that kind of a great question. That's the thing that kind of surprised me is that Chris Shula comes out, gives him credit, says, anytime he steps into the bright lights, he shines, right? And, he took on the green dot role and did a really nice job. And so it'd be one thing if like, okay, this is just kind of a one-dimensional, just like sideline to sideline, linebacker, but he's good in coverage. I thought he was really good. They used him blitzing, at times. I think he could do it all. And I just think that they're cutting him here, and it's almost, I'm not saying they're doing it to look like anything because that's not how NFL teams operate, but it almost feels like one of those like cute moves that you make to try to show everybody like, and again, that's not what I'm saying, but it feels like it's one of those moves that shows everybody this is how good our roster is. We're now cutting guys that we drafted in the 5th round. I didn't like it. I did not like it at all.
Gotcha. You've cut the Doliak guy instead of him if it came down to those 2 guys?
So I've been asked this question a million times today, and I love them equally. Okay, so the way I would word it, no. The way I would word it is I'm not a father, but when I do have kids, right? If I had 2 kids and they're like, you can only save one of them, I'd be like, I wouldn't be able to answer that question. I love them equally.
That's you don't get to do that at all. Z-Bot, come on. I need some highlights.
All right. Well, let me just say this.
I've not got an answer.
Let me just say this, okay? Because I interviewed Troy Reeder, and I like the guy, and I don't hate him like every Rams fan does. But I would have just cut Troy Reeder outright.
Don't get that option. You're not getting that option, Brody.
Well, why not?
You're the Rams general manager. You're facing this, and we got to keep Troy for reasons outside of your knowledge right now. Just accept it for that. There's something outside of this, Troy, so it's coming down to these 2 guys. Which one do you go with?
I can't choose, so you can choose for me type deal.
So like that 52-man roster, I guess.
I'm literally at that point. I'm
They're
at that point. You flip a coin. I love them both equally. Like
Jesse,
Brandon's gonna off them both unless you pick one.
I am. I'm putting a second bullet in the gun.
I'm not doing it. I can't do it. I don't have
like a definitive one, or they both become 49ers.
Ooh.
Oh dear God.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
I still can't do it. It's It's way too hard.
Would you have come on here tonight saying the same thing about Sean Dolak that you're now saying about Chris Paul in terms of your resentment in the Rams getting rid of him?
Yes, absolutely. That was what I was saying. That was exactly what I was saying is you have Troy Reeder. If you want to keep him around, then do what you did to Akello last year when you put him on the practice squad over Trey White, who wasn't even good. So that's the thing that like annoys me is that they have now expanded the practice squad so you could literally put veterans on there and you're still not using it. Who is going to pick up Troy Reeder? And again, I don't hate Troy Reeder like everyone else does. I think he could play in this league. I just know what he is. He's a depth piece, okay? So like that's the thing that irks me is that you just put him on the practice squad. He's not going to get claimed because he's a veteran, so he doesn't have to go through the waiver process. I could tell you he's not going to get claimed anyway.